David. I am a cultural ecologist, which sort of combines anthropology and ecology. And I'm a philosopher, or what some folks call a geophilosopher. That is one who is working out the ways of thinking, the ways of speaking under the influence of a more than human earth. As an ecologist, I am especially known for my work in the ecology of perception, or what we could call the ecology of sensory experience, the way that the activity of our eyes and our ears and our skin and our nostrils bind our separate organisms into the land. That is the way in which sensory perception functions like a kind of glue that binds our individual nervous systems into the encompassing ecosystem. But I'm also known for my work in the ecology of language. That is how what we say has such a profound influence upon what we see or what we hear or even taste of the earth around us. Because I'm convinced that there are ways of speaking that actually encourage and enhance that spontaneous reciprocity between our animal body and the animate earth around us. But I'm just as convinced that there are many ways of speaking which many of us have inherited from the culture into which we were born, ways of speaking that frustrate the senses, that inhibit and stifle that instinctive rapport between our animal senses and the earthly sensuous. For instance, the ways that we so often objectify the natural world around us, writing and speaking of every entity, whether it be a clump of moss or a praying mantis or a mountain, as though it were a determinate, quantifiable object without its own sensations and desires, as though in order to describe another being with any precision, we first had to strip it of its living otherness, or had to envision it as a set of passive mechanisms with no spontaneity, no subjectivity, no active agency of its own, as though a toad or a cottonwood tree was a fixed and finished entity waiting to be figured out by us, rather than an enigmatic presence with whom we have been drawn into relationship. In truth, when we're really awake to the life of our senses, when we're really watching with our animal eyes and listening with our animal ears, we discover that nothing in the world around us is directly experienced as a passive or inanimate object. Nothing. Each thing, each entity that meets our gaze with its own secrets, well, yes, it has its secrets. And if we lend it our attention, we're drawn into a dynamic interaction wherein we are taught and sometimes transformed by this other being. In the realm of direct sensory experience, everything is animate. Everything moves. Although, of course, some things move a lot slower than other things, like the ground underfoot and the rocks and the hills, and yet they still move. Everything moves. Now, here are some words of an old Inuit elder named Nalungiak. Her words were recorded in the far north early in the last century by the great Scandinavian explorer Knud Rasmussen, and later translated into English. This is what this old woman, Nalungiak, said to him. In the very earliest time, when both people and animals lived on Earth, a person could become an animal if she wanted to, and an animal could become a human being. Sometimes they were people and sometimes animals, and there was no difference. All spoke the same language. See, that was the time when words were like magic. A word spoken by chance might have strange consequences. It might suddenly come alive, and what people wanted to happen could happen. All you had to do was say it. Nobody can explain this. That's just the way it was. So, for a mighty long time, we humans have thought of ourselves, humankind, as being radically different from all the other animals. We've assumed that, well, we have language or meaningful speech, the other animals don't, or that we humans alone are really conscious and aware, and the animals are mostly unconscious, driven by instinct. But such assumptions are an astonishing arrogance, I think. And by speaking in this way, we blind ourselves. We blind ourselves to the unique intelligence of other animals. Such ways of speaking close down our senses, blinding our eyes to other shapes of sentience, so that we're unable to see anything that is not human or humanly built. And it deafens our ears to anything that does not speak in words. Of course, other animals have meaningful speech, but they do not speak in words. Each animal, each creature, whether a humpback whale or an earthworm, a raven or a coyote or a spider, has its own utterly unique ways of moving through the world, its unique ways of dancing, of feeling, of expressing itself, just as we too are utterly unique. An extraordinary animal, this human being, but an animal nonetheless, and hence in many ways, just one of the gang. We live in this many-voiced wonder of a world where most of the other voices do not speak in words. So becoming animal, identifying with one's body, is a way to wake up one's senses and become attuned to the sensuous, to the local earth, right where you live, your place. This place with all of its strange nuances that are different from any other place. It seems to me that those of us who work to preserve wild nature have to work as well for a return to our senses and for a renewed respect for sensorial modes of knowing, because our senses are our most immediate access to the more than human world around us. The eyes, the ears, the nostrils catching faint whiffs of sea salt on the breeze, the fingertips grazing the smooth bark of an aspen tree, this porous skin rippling with chills at the felt presence of another animal. Our bodily senses bring us into relation with the breathing earth at every moment. If humankind seems to have forgotten its thorough dependence upon the earthly community of beings, it can only be because we've forgotten or dismissed as irrelevant the sensory dimension of our lives. These senses are what is most wild in us, capacities that we share in some manner, not only with other primates, but with most other entities in the living landscape, from earthworms to eagles. Flowers responding to sunlight, tree roots extending rootlets in search of water, even the chemotaxis of a simple bacterium. Here too are sensation and sensitivity, distant variants of our own sentience. Apart from breathing and eating, the senses are our most intimate link with the living land, the primary way that the earth has of influencing our moods and of guiding our actions. Think of a honeybee drawn by vision and a kind of olfaction into the heart of a wildflower. Sensory perception, thus affecting the intimate coupling between this organism and its local world. Our own senses too have co-evolved with the sensuous earth that surrounds us. The human eyes have evolved in subtle interaction with the oceans and the air, formed and informed by the shifting patterns of the visible world. Our ears are now tuned by their very structure to the howling of wolves and the honking of geese. Sensory experience, we might say, is the way our body binds its life to the other lives that surround it, the way the earth couples itself to our thoughts and our dreams. Sensory perception is the glue that binds our separate nervous systems into the wider encompassing ecosystem. As that bumblebee's compound eye draws it into the wildflower, as a salmon dreams its way through gradients of scent toward its home stream, our own senses have long tuned our awareness to particular aspects and shifts in the land, inducing particular moods, insights, and even actions that we mistakenly attribute just to ourselves. If we ignore and devalue sensory experience, we lose our primary source of alignment with the larger ecology, imperiling both ourselves and the earth in that process. Sensory experience, when it's honored, renews the bond between our bodies and the breathing earth. So what I'm speaking of is a kind of radical immanence. I'm inviting myself every day to step back inside a living cosmos that is alive through and through, everything alive, awake, aware, to become aware of your body as Zia was saying, quoting Murshid, that the body is the spirit. It is sort of the very presence, the thickness, the radiance of spirit. To become aware of this body as this luminous, breathing, speaking, imagining form that you are. And in that way, to become animal and to celebrate your animality is not to reduce the mind or the spirit to the material body, but to radically expand our sense of the body, our sense of matter and materiality, such that this body becomes luminous, but not just our body, but the whole body of the land around us, the body of the earth breathing around us. For way too long, we associated the spirit with a dimension outside the sensuous world, a hidden dimension to which humans alone had access. But really, I'm sure many of you know that the word spirit is cognate with the word respiration, both from that old Latin word spiritus, which originally meant the breath and the wind and the air itself. Same with our word psyche, from which we get psychology or psychiatry. The psyche, this word for the soul, comes from the old Greek word psyche, which originally meant a breath or a gust of wind. Even such a scientifically respectable word as atmosphere, where does that come from? Well, the same origin as the Sanskrit word Atman, or soul. But they all derive from the older Indo-European root, atmos, which meant the soul, which is the air which is the soul. So the spirit is not somewhere else. It is not outside and beyond the material world. It is the subtle breath of this earth. It is the air itself. The air, which is born of the interbreathing of all us animals, with the plants rooted in the ground around our home, around our city. Of course, there'd be no oxygen for us animals to breathe in if it were not for all those rooted and leafing and needled beings who are breathing out the oxygen we all need to take in. And we inhale some of this invisible stuff and we circulate it within our bodies and alchemize it within our flesh. And then we breathe out the air now infused with carbon dioxide, which is the precise ingredient that all those plants need to breathe in for their photosynthetic metabolism. So what we breathe out, all the plants are breathing in. And what the plants breathe out, all us animals are breathing in. Talk about reciprocity. And the atmosphere of this earth is born of this reciprocity, this exchange between animals and plants, with the soils, with the breathing oceans, all percolating into existence. This breathing mysterium we call the atmosphere. And so we don't live on the earth. We actually live immersed, embedded, swimming within the atmosphere, this ocean of air, which is not just a bunch of gases that are held to Earth by Earth's gravity. No, it's percolated into existence by all of the life on Earth's surface, interbreathing with one another. What a magic. And we live down here inside this ocean of air, immersed within its depths. We live in the spirit, in the sentience. And so, to echo what Zia was sharing moments ago, perhaps in some very important sense, the mind or the spirit itself is not something in us, inside us. And yet, perhaps there is an interiority to the spirit, yes, but it's not because it's inside us, but because we are bodily inside it, along with the bodies of all the other animals and the plants and the drifting clouds, because we live and dance within a mind, within a spirit that is not ours, but is rather the earth's. So I'll end there for the moment, maybe with this simple poem by Rainer Maria Rilke. Rilke says, not to be cut off, not through the slightest partition, shut out from the law of the stars. The inner, what is it if not intensified sky, hurled through with birds and deep with the winds of homecoming? That's Rilke.